We got Eric Skaar in the house. We're going to be doing the 40-degree cold plunge. Are you ready, buddy?
I am ready.
All right, well, let's get it.
Yes. Oh, that's good and cold. Glorious. Oh.
Can Eric fit inside the cold plunge? Is it possible for you to get all the way in? Eric's not a small guy, by the way. He's 6.5 feet tall.
That is so cold. That is the best way to get over jet lag. Holy.
That's right. Eric is just fresh off a plane from China.
Yeah.
We'll get into that more later.
48 hours into my jet lag. Feels great.
Welcome to Frozen Millionaires, the show where we submerge successful people in ice-cold water, then sit them down to talk about how they've achieved success. I'm your host, George McCleary, and I have a penchant for ambition, for entrepreneurship, and for watching my friends suffer in cold water. No tech CEOs or Wall Street titans here. These are the self-made millionaires next door, and they're fresh out of the cold plunge and telling their stories. What's up, friends, and welcome to episode 5 of Frozen Millionaires. So it's no secret that I'm in real estate, and I happen to know a lot of really successful real estate people. But it's also no secret that I love learning about other business models in other fields, especially unconventional ones that have led to big success. And that's what we've got today with my guest, Eric Skaar. Eric runs a company called Sigma Worldwide, and their specialty is manufacturing goods in Asia. So you know the drill. It's cheaper to make stuff over there. But I'd always figured there were these massive factories with machines the size of houses, and thus just out of reach for anyone except for a big company with a ton of capital. But as Eric proves today, that's not the case. Coming out of Middlebury College, and quick shout out to Middlebury College for accepting me out of high school and then rejecting my transfer application. But anyway, out of Middlebury College, Eric had a penchant for manufacturing processes and the thrill and challenge of doing business abroad. So he hopped on a plane, learned to speak Mandarin, and just got after it. As you'd expect, it was a heck of a road building a company that now operates several factories throughout Asia. And some challenges never go away. For instance, if it's noon there, it's 3 a.m. in Shanghai the next day, so your workday could very well start at 5 p.m. on a Sunday. So there are a lot of hurdles to overcome, and Eric has had a heck of a ride. As for the cold plunge, we could barely fit the guy in there. He's real tall, which apparently makes him a big celebrity in Asia. When you're 6.5 feet tall, you're basically Victor Wembanyama everywhere you go. But he took the cold plunge like a man, and apparently it cured his jet lag right there on the spot. And if you're flying in and out of China on the regular, I'd say that's a good thing. Here's my conversation with Eric Skaar. In the studio today, we have Eric Skaar.
Thank you for having me.
I don't have much of an intro prepared for you because I don't know a whole lot about what it is that you do, apart from that you're doing a lot of business in Asia. So why don't you give everybody just the elevator pitch of who you are, introduce yourself, and what it is that you do.
Sure. My name's Eric Skaar. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Sigma Worldwide. We are an engineering and manufacturing company with factories in China and Vietnam. We work in consumer electronics, accessories, so carrying solutions, protective cases, charging devices.
So little widgets on Amazon all the way up through more sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, we try to stay away from the commodity widgets. We do more, our sweet spot's generally things that are highly engineered and have a mixture of soft materials and plastics, or some soft materials and electronics, so like wearable medical devices.
Wearable medical devices. Give me an example of that.
There is a company, and they were LinkedIn cool for a little bit, and they do a
LinkedIn cool. That's a variety of cool. I'm not sure I've ever seen those.
It's not actually cool.
Put together before.
It's not actually cool, but they have a product where basically when someone has an uncontrollable tremor, like a Parkinson's type thing,
right,
their device provides a countervailing electrical impulse that calms that.
Oh.
And so we don't make the actual CPU of that thing, but we make the soft good that has embedded electrodes, flexible PCBAs, wiring.
So a bit more specialized than like an Apple AirTag keychain or something like that.
That's I cannot speak to that, but I'd say that you can get very specialized in different types of products depending on who's making it and how engaged their engineering teams are. And
Got it.
specifying everything that goes into a product.
But basically, you're making products at scale for as low cost as possible because labor and materials are less expensive in Asia, and then you're importing them into America, and then are all over the world. Then,
All over the world. So we don't have a brand. I am so unenthusiastic about branding and marketing that I would have no idea where to start. But I really do like engineering and operations and manufacturing.
So you're just B2B.
Yeah, completely B2B. And we work with our client base really has like 3 core pillars to it. One is like startups, companies that have a new idea and they really leverage our engineering capabilities. And they also like some of the other things that we do. Like our second pillar from a client basis are like really big companies. So some of America's tech giants. And what they like is that we work with startups that prove our engineering capabilities, and we can do cool new stuff, but we also can follow processes and do best in class manufacturing. Right. Then we work also with different brands that you would see in like a Verizon, AT&T, Best Buy, you name it. That run the spectrum from really large, hundreds of millions in revenue down to like smaller, kind of working their way into mid-sized type brands.
Speaking of scale, give me a sense of scale, because my impression of when I hear about things being printed in China, I think of a massive factory with hundreds of workers scurrying about. But you've got a handful of these. Give me a sense of scale as to where you are today. In terms of
so right now we've got 4 facilities. We've got 2 in China and 2 in Vietnam. The first facility we opened in China, we started the process in 2018 and it was fully operational in 2019. And that's a smaller facility. It's like, I have to go metric here, but it's like 4,500 square meters. So 45,000 square feet.
Yeah, I've never been able to do that conversion in my
just
head.
10. Just use 10.
It's just when it's when I look at international real estate, they'll have like square meters. It'll be like, whoa, this thing's only 30 square meters. How do people even live in that? And then,
right.
But it's like a few hundred square feet.
Yeah. And that one has usually about 250 or so people is about the operating size of it. And then our new facility in China is meaningfully larger. It's 12,500 square meters. So, again, 125,000 square feet.
Jamie, can you pull up how many square feet that is? Oh wait, I don't have it.
Just Jamie rough estimates. And that one we are it's currently got a couple hundred workers in it, and it's going up to about 750 in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then in Vietnam, we've got 2 sites. One is a project-specific site in Bac Giang, which is just north of Hanoi. And that facility currently has about 80 people and is going to around 250 in the next 6 weeks.
Wow.
And then the last facility is in Haiphong, and that's roughly 5,000 square meters. And that one will have about 100 workers by early to mid-December, and then in Q1, towards the end of Q1, we'll transition out of the first factory in Vietnam and bring everything under one roof in Haiphong.
Oh, wow. So then all these places, like clearly they have a ton of employees and they've got a certain size. But whenever I watch those shows, I love the show How It's Made. Mm-hmm. You ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm always struck by how few people there are actually there doing the work and how these machines just automate this entire process. And I swear there's shows out there where I see maybe 2 or 3 people the entire time that this whole thing is being processed. And so so it makes me think that employees might not be maybe the best measure of exactly how much stuff you're putting out. So give me a sense of like output for these things, and how dependent is that upon employees doing stuff for you?
I guess so. I want to make sure I get the number right, but I think my my business partner likes to keep track of some of this stuff, and this month, I think we ship in our lifetime, like we've now shipped about $250 million worth of product total, or something like that. It was like a decent sized number, but and that's in 12 years. But yeah, like
still, that's a lot. That's
a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. When you multiply it by whatever it gets
retail
sold
value,
to,
250 million, or that like
no,
sold...
like we from us. So like,
okay, so the retail value on that's probably like 500 or maybe more. Or
it's going to be a big number because we always assume there's a multiple on what we sell to.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, it's got to land somewhere, and then they've got to probably mark it up, and
everyone marks it up. It's always
so
a funny
it's probably
thing.
well over $1 billion then.
Yeah, I'd say probably $1 billion worth of consumer products we've made.
Wow.
So
well, that's a milestone. I'd
something.
say you should have that on a little clipboard somewhere,
It's one that comes up, but like again, how to like measure what we do or how big we are, because there are certain processes that are like, we've got plastic injection machines that are manned by robots, but we also have some really manual processes, and then everything in between with lots of like semi-automated processes where a robot does the work, but a human puts a semi-finished product in a machine, closes the door, presses a button,
make sure that everything works.
Make sure it all works. It comes out looking right,
And then if it doesn't work, there's a guy that can fix that and things like that.
Exactly.
Great. So cool. All right. Now that we've got a little overview of just what your business looks like today, we love to hear the full story, the full arc of these things, because you didn't wake up 12 years ago and it was like this and you've maintained the same. Take me back to the beginning. In fact, take me back further, because I know you went to Middlebury, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and that was actually how we met each other.
Correct.
We were at Wallace. So quick little anecdote. I was at Wallace Park and I see a fella that has a Middlebury shirt on, or was it a hat? It was a hat. Yeah, it was a hat. And Middlebury's not, the regalia from that school is not something you see a whole lot of out here on the West Coast, but it's a great school. My sister went there. I got in there out of high school and I actually wanted to transfer there, but they said no. Yeah. They're like a girl you shunned who just said, nope, you had your chance. But and I would have gone there. That was where I wanted to go. I went to Emory instead. Things worked out fine. However,
we would have been classmates.
Yeah, we would. Yeah, well, actually, no. I think you're a few years younger than I am. I think. But either way, I walk up to the guy and I was like, "Hey, man, you go to Middlebury?" He's like, "Yeah." Like, you've heard of it? I'm like, sure have. And so we get to talking, and and that yada yada, and that brings us to today.
Sure.
So you're at Middlebury, and you're a clueless kid. Bring us from there to today.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting 20-year process. So essentially, somewhere along the lines, while I was at Middlebury, one of my very good friends from high school had gone and done a summer abroad in China, and was like, "You should come check it out. It's it's weird," and that was like, I'm okay with weird.
So that's a good selling point.
That was a good starting point. And I had from a pretty early on not really had any interest in a normal career path. Just wasn't. It was kind
of that coupled with wanderlust a little bit as well?
For sure. I was someone who didn't have a passport until I was 17 or 18 years old, and my first trip out of the country was with my parents to go to London, and I was like, "There's a lot out there. I want to see it."
Where'd you grow up again?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay, so you're on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was just I was like, yeah, I want to go do something outside of the country. I'd like to understand more about what's being billed as China, the great next big thing.
Sure.
And so between my junior and senior year, I applied to go to Harvard Extension School. I took a class on the Chinese, Indian, and East Asian economies that was taught by a former Indian finance minister.
Oh, wow.
And so that was a pretty good eye-opening experience of just what the development model looked like there.
So that kind of sparked your interest in the region and business.
Yeah, I was an econ major, and I felt like prior to taking that class, lots of economic theory was being explained to me as this is the neoclassical model, blah, 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 blah. And then the last couple weeks last 2 sessions of a macro theory class would be and China's doing it completely differently, and it seems like it's working. And I was like, well,
Well, I'd like to know
I'd
more
like
about
to know
that.
more. And so
this fella in the Harvard Extension School dives into that.
yeah, he like, just the full explanation of, at the time, again, 20 years ago, what like the economic development model, how it went from Japan and their like manufacturing prowess to spreading to Taiwan and South Korea and the East Asian tigers. And this
is like right around like 2000, 2003.
This was right after China joined the WTO. And so like, then there was like the conversation of China kind of coming up behind the East Asian tigers and taking all of their manufacturing and development, mojo essentially, and consolidating it in Guangdong province. And so did that, and then was like, okay, well, I want to figure out how to get to China. So Middlebury has a J term where basically it's a 4-1-4 schedule where the month of January you take one class and ski or party.
I was always jealous of that. My sister told me about that, and I was like, that sounds amazing.
I took a class on Lord of the Rings. So that was a pretty awesome time.
Meanwhile, the rest of us were not skiing, not learning about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and probably way more sober.
Sounds about right.
But I took a J-term class on like teaching English as a second language and explained to the professor of that class this like goal of getting to China, and if he saw any programs that were coming up that were of interest, because I didn't want to just like show up on a tourist visa, do like one thing wrong and like get blacklisted for life. So I was like, be good to have a formal program to get me over there.
Yeah, some kind of foothold.
And so ends up, he recommended a course from Concordia University, which used to be in Portland, and they have a campus in Irvine, California. And for 10 or so years, they did a master's in international studies that would take a summer in Irvine, a year in China, another summer in Irvine, and then you work on a thesis. And so I was like, all right, that works for me. And so through them, I got over to, and the program, what was also interesting is that it went to Shenzhen, China, which was the first special economic zone. So again, going back to like the economics of the whole thing, it's like, the special economic zones are like 25% GDP growth year over year. So like, well, what's going on over there? So got to go to Shenzhen.
Wow.
First year teaching English at a Chinese public middle school, which was its own
middle school.
Yeah, which was hilarious.
Like the height of childhood assholery.
Oh, totally. And it's global.
And and meanwhile, you come in a white 6'6" dude, and you're having to. That sounds like a really special form of hell.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
It was unique. But around that time, I convinced my then girlfriend, now wife, to come visit China.
Oh.
And this is where it actually gets into like career stuff, because first, before she came to visit, I was like, I have to be able to speak some Chinese. So I kind of doubled down on my studying. Then during her visit, with some of my friends, we were hanging out at a bar that was pretty popular with the small expat population of Shenzhen.
Yeah.
And one of my moron buddies like starts to harass some Irish dudes, and they start like being like, piss off, and he's like, what, you won't have a shot of Jameson's with me, you're Irish. And like my wife and Sophia and I went over, and we're just like, dude, just get out, like, what are you doing?
Have you not heard that the Irish love to fight?
Yeah. And so but there's an American with them, and he's like, you guys are American. And we're like, yep. We're like, you're American. He's like, yep. And so we started talking, and he's like, what are you doing? And I explained what I just explained to you. And Sophia was at the time still at Middlebury, and she's like, well, I'm in the middle of my like winter break. I go to a small liberal arts college in Vermont. You've never heard of it. And he was like, try me. We're like, Middlebury? He's like, I graduated in 2000.5. We're like, bullshit. Like, we're like, what was your freshman dorm? He's like, Battelle. I was like, that's where I was. Okay. And like,
holy smokes.
And so he ended up having a small manufacturing company, and he was like, look, if you're studying Mandarin and you get your like Mandarin good enough that you're employable, like, I'll have a job for you. And so fast forward, my wife decided to move to China. I started taking lessons, or like 4 hours a day of Mandarin coursework at the local university, and then teaching.
Wow, so you're diving in at this point.
Yeah, and then teaching English in the afternoon.
It wasn't just that conversation with that guy, but all this seemed to be kind of like building up inside you. It seems like, and so when that conversation had happened in that bar, was that like your moment of just like, this is the opportunity that I've been waiting for? This is like
I was trying to find different opportunities. Just it was the world of manufacturing. I've always enjoyed like building stuff, and so just trying to poke around at different opportunities that were out there, and this was the one where I was like, oh, this actually like could make some sense, like,
because there has to be a fire inside you if you were going to study Mandarin, which I hear is really hard.
It's like so many people wash out after like the first month because you're just making sounds. You sound like you're like bleeding like a lamb because you truly just have to like learn how to make the sounds before you can speak the language. And most people are like, yo, I just want to learn how to get in a taxi cab and tell them where I'm going. Right. And like, you have to trust the process.
During this time, are you just following your like interest of like, hey, I like manufacturing, I'm interested in this region, I'm going to learn this language, but did you have like an end game in mind of where you ended up wanting to land, or was just this rung of the ladder was enough to kind of drive you forward?
Yeah, well, I knew at some point I wanted to start my own business. I didn't know at that point what it was or what it would look like, but like I had a pretty good handle on like, at some point I want to do this for myself, whatever this is. And this got me into basically all of a sudden I'm like in all these factories in the middle of all sorts of nowhere. I'm managing, building snowboard bindings, which are, if those fall apart, someone's flying down the side of a mountain for like a fairly reputable brand. And everywhere I'm going, it's just like no one speaks a word of English. So my Chinese, my Mandarin went from, very like robotic, I'm learning in a classroom, to like, I'm chopping shop and talking about screwdrivers. And so,
and to this day, you're like, are you like fluent or?
Yeah, I spent the last couple of weeks like working in Mandarin in my factory. So like, yeah.
So when you were chopping it up with your factory workers, you were doing so in Mandarin.
Correct.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So that's been a funny part of the whole thing, but did that for a couple of years. And then, a different friend from Middlebury, again, like Middlebury's got like a lot of the early part of my story.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Your then girlfriend, now wife, the guy you met in the bar.
Yep.
Wow.
First boss. And then as I was like getting some experience, a friend of mine, he ended up being, very like, been a very near and dear friend. He's actually the one who had the Vizsla. Oh, cool. But he speaking of,
there's Daisy knocking stuff over in the background.
He was working at a slightly larger, or they were meaningfully larger manufacturing company, Daisy. And he wanted to move from Hong Kong to Shanghai, but he wasn't going to be able to do so until he could backfill his role. And so he put me in for the job. And initially it was like random projects and working with the managing director of this company to like open a sample room in like some backwater province and just like start up the new office in Shenzhen, and was doing all of that. And then like the real like door opening opportunity occurred, and that company was starting to work with BlackBerry, which tells you how long ago this was.
Right. Yeah. Because they were all the rage back then, like mid 2000s. Like
it was like 2007, 2008ish, and so they were trying to become the company to make all the holsters.
Oh whoa!
And we're
like a BlackBerry on your hip was the height of coolness at the time. Man. Yeah, like they actually had the keyboard on there. That was.
Have you seen? They just did a movie on the rise and fall. They being some like young dudes from Canada, I think.
Oh wow!
But so what ended up happening is I got sent to like the project was, or projects were just failing miserably. Like the salespeople did a great job, the operations people were just blowing it. And so like as a Hail Mary, they're like, let's send the white dude to the meeting. And I was like, what do you want me to do? They're like, just listen, tell us what's going on. Like what is failing? And so I went into this meeting, and it was like 2 engineers from BlackBerry on one side of the table, myself and a few people from Hong Kong and China on the other side of the table. and the engineers are just like peppering them with yes or no questions, and not a single response they're getting back is a yes or no. And they are just enraged. Like, I'm just watching like the nicest dudes become the angriest dudes in real time.
Oh man.
And finally I'm just like, I'm not supposed to say anything.
They're like a political debate moderator where you just can't get a straight answer, and it's just
it just got to a point where I was like, you know what? Time out. And I turned, and even though most of the people spoke Cantonese and not Mandarin, I was like, yo, what is going on? Like, break it down for me. Give me all the explanations you want, but then let me answer.
So it sounds
questions.
like the other guys were kind of being like a little bit more polite and diplomatic, being okay and letting it slide with those shitty answers that they were getting.
But
you'd interjected and said like, all right, man.
No, I was just like, these guys are about to like leave this meeting and call their bosses and be like, disconnect these programs. Like, these guys can't handle it. And so instead I was just like, just tell me what's going on. Like, warts and all, like, tell me all the bad news that you're afraid to tell these guys.
Right.
And they just like unloaded on me, and like I turned and I'll just be like, no. The thing you want ready right now is not ready, but like in 4 hours we'll have the replacement material and the prototype will be built, and you can review it in 3 of the 4 colors at 6 p.m. instead of 2 p.m. And they were like, cool. Status report, corrective action plan, all in place.
So you're a hero from this meeting, essentially. Like,
within like, no joke, 6 months of that meeting, I'm like 23 years old. I am now running a $20 million division of a company with like 18 direct reports.
Damn.
Like, and like I won Research in Motion Supplier of the Year within like 18 months of that meeting.
Just by kind of like just sort of being able to read the room and see what was actually happening. And just say, hey man, just spit it out.
Just distilling also, like, there are these yes or no questions where they just start the response by saying like, actually. It's like, actually is not yes or no. Just like, but it's just like I could see the cultural difference and how it was creating frustrations probably for both sides. And I was just like, all right, I will happily get in between this and like calm you guys down, because you don't have to be the ones to say yes or no or like take that black and white stance, and calm you guys down because you'll get a yes or no, and I'll happily take that stance. And
so you're at a young age advancing, like, so
yeah,
you're speaking Mandarin, you're getting the operations, you're literally speaking the language in both, you know, business and the actual language itself. And so but you still have in the back of your mind, hey man, I could probably do this for myself. But the first thing I think of when I think of that, like starting like a factory, I think is the CapEx has to be off the charts.
Yeah, so what ended up happening is around that time, we did a great job for BlackBerry, won Supplier of the Year for them. They used to have like their own award ceremony. It was great. It's a little trophy.
Sweet.
And then they peaked. And the backside of that peak was very steep. And at the same time, the financial crisis was happening in 2008 to 2010. Ooh. So a lot of the other 2 divisions of the company were like handbags and like gift with purchase, which is when someone buys perfume at an airport and they're handed a little like makeup pouch with it. And so this stuff, they were not that company at the time was not in a position to command like the margins they had historically commanded once the bottom fell out of the world economy.
Right.
And the company was just going to hell real fast. And at that point, I'd gotten to know the CEO quite well. I ran his most profitable division and was a bit of a cowboy because I was 23, 24 years old. And
the CEO, is he Chinese or is he
No,
American?
he's a dude from New York. And so
there you go.
He was having trouble with the board. They didn't want to do what he thought was necessary to fix the company. So
the board, is this a private company or is this publicly?
A privately held company.
Okay.
Private equity at the time. And so he was just like, you know, I'm pretty sure the board is going to want to replace me. And assuming that happens, then let's start our own thing. And I was like, yes. Let's talk about how we do this. And so he and I looked at like what we were respectively good at and then where we had gaps. And so we initially started with a grand total of 5 partners. One was a European guy who was handling sales, myself, Jeff, who's still my business partner. Was my previous CEO. And then 2 other gentlemen, one who did operations, one who did quality. Mm-hmm. And we started the company. We didn't start as a factory. We started really as an engineering company. So we would help other businesses and brands develop new products. And so as a new, tablets came out and like the iPad, and people wanted to develop new and exciting accessories around those, we would help them with designing and engineering it. Not many people knew enough about plastic and soft goods to make the two work together.
Right.
And so for the first 7 or 8 years, we were really an engineering company that could then manage the supply chain. But the difficulty of that is, like, once you've developed the product, there's a lot of money in the long tail of a product. But if every year a new device comes out and there's a new opportunity for other people to bid on something, and you're not adding value with the engineering side anymore because it's really just refreshing or resizing, then if you're not the primary manufacturer, it's hard to, engage in that commodity-like race to the bottom on cost. So,
is it a race to the bottom every single time on these things, essentially?
Once the product has been developed and the processes are mature, and I'd say that some products have more secret sauce than others, and there's certain simple, like, processes. We call it precision die cutting and laminating. So, like, taking a soft material and controlling the tolerances and specs of it so that it can be applied to a piece of plastic in a way that, like,
right, so that it can slip over like an iPad or
something. And it looks perfect, yeah. And that's relatively straightforward.
Right.
Other stuff, taking the same soft material and heating it up and forming it and then cooling it down so it holds its shape, and then. But
having, like, the engineering and, like, the innovation portion, I mean, that has to be really kind of the only way that you don't have that commoditized race to the bottom. Completely. And so you have that in-house then at that point that you're starting with that soon-to-be ousted CEO.
So yeah, he and I, with the first people that we brought in as partners, and then our first hire is still our head of engineering to this day. So 12 years later, he's with the company.
Oh wow! And it's still you with that same guy?
Yeah. So his name's Jeff, and Jeff and I.
So you and Jeff still doing this after 12 years.
The two of us. The others. So one guy just was not meant for the entrepreneur's lifestyle, and he, we bought him out, I think, in like the first 6 to 12 months. The second, the guy who started out as head of quality, we had a good year and he decided to retire on that, and so we bought him out. Then a few years later, the head of operations
must have been a heck of a year if he wants to retire on that. Or maybe he was at the end of his career anyway. But but he wasn't like 32 and figured.
No, these guys were like markedly older than me. Like they were in their 60s.
Okay.
So they were kind of doing it as like a last piece of the puzzle in their careers. And so we had another retire probably 6 or 7 years ago now. And then what happened in our businesses for the first 6 or so years of our existence, every time we'd have a good year, someone would retire and we'd have to use operating cash flows to buy them out instead of reinvesting in the business. And then we did do that cycle twice.
But at the same time, you're consolidating your equity in a business that is expanding.
Yeah, exactly. It was
so your ownership interests have only grown as the company has gotten bigger. So I mean,
it's a good problem to have.
That's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, buying people out, it sucks away all, I do a lot of discussion on this show, especially because I have a lot of real estate guys, the difference between making money and building wealth, and cash flow versus wealth accumulation and everything. And so you're taking money out of one bucket and into another in a lot of cases. And It sounds like this is kind of the version of that for having a big manufacturing company essentially.
I would say that it was certainly. You're certainly building wealth and building equity. I would say that those were also hands down the least productive years of the company, because when you're dealing with like partner negotiations instead of building or improving, like you get 24 hours in a day.
That would drive me crazy.
It was not great.
Yeah.
It's actually been like one of those things where I'm like, a great lesson learned is, whatever you can do to minimize, the amount of time you spend negotiating with your business partners rather than like focusing on the business at hand.
Getting mired in those conversations is a massive time suck that I never like to do.
Total waste of time. But yeah, then we got to the point where, a few years ago, it was like, we've had good years. We can solve this problem of the long tail and what's our value add after the engineering by purchasing a factory. So we took one of our existing vendors and we were like, you're good, but you're too small. So we're going to buy you and then triple your footprint. And, you can continue to manage it while we provide, a lot more of the support when it comes to quality and engineering and other parts of the business.
So I still want to hear more about the ARC, but when it comes to like buying a factory and getting that going, are you purchasing all of the real estate and then buying all the machines in there? Is it like a one big house plus furniture type of deal, or are you leasing and doing the CapEx of the equipment?
No, so we haven't purchased any land. That's we always wanted to be an asset light company, and then that changed. Purchasing land, we go on the lease model right now. I think at a certain point we may look into purchasing land and building a factory from the ground up, if only because we could capture more depreciation that way.
Oh yeah.
But for now we've leased. In Vietnam they call them ready built factories, RBFs, which is essentially like,
is it like a tilt up concrete type of thing?
It's a big slab of concrete with a warehouse on top of it, and then you can outfit it internally how you want, drop ceilings, whatever it is you want to do.
Sure.
And in China, it's a little bit different. They go with the vertical factories. So we've got, one of our facilities has 5 floors, and that's not really the norm in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, it's we tend to lease, and then we purchase equipment and fill the factory with equipment that way.
Gotcha. And purchasing this equipment, so again with the CapEx, do you have some sort of like private equity backing? Because imagine kitting out one of these factories you can't be money just out of your own bank account. You gotta have some debt and equity. Like how do you?
We've done it. What's actually been kind of great. And I was last night fortunate enough to sit with some PSU business school professors at a wine dinner at the Mac. And
nice. That's the Multnomah Athletic Club. That's where Eric and I go to work out.
Yeah, it needs a cold plunge.
It does.
But we were talking about this, and I'm like, I can get local currency loans at like 3 to 5% right now in China.
Really?
Which is,
it's like an SBA loan, but for China, basically. Like,
yeah, it's great. Like, and so we've been able to finance the equipment at like
what kind of LTV?
80%.
Holy smokes, that's great.
Yeah, so
you buy a $10 million piece of equipment, it's going to cost you like $2 million out of pocket.
Right.
And you've got that more or less, like, do you have that in the coffers, or do you have some backing for that?
So we also have the ability to finance off of our accounts receivable.
Okay.
So that's one way that we've worked with it. And then we have also done some private financing. So having those who are outside, usually we have our initial investor pool, and we'll go to those individuals and see if they want to provide short-term financing for what we consider a favorable return given the relatively low risk of some of the things.
Yeah, I may have glanced at one of those a while back. It was pretty good. It was like 20%, but it was one of those things where I couldn't really understand it.
Right.
Like, it was outside of my list.
It's a very niche.
How do I explain this to me in football terms, or explain this to me in real estate terms?
It's a niche thing because generally we don't need it, but it's really at times when you're scaling the business where you're basically, my dad puts it in his term is like, you're limited by your margins. I'm like, well, not totally, because you could still borrow, or if but we're very adverse to like raising a round of financing that would require us to give up equity, because at this point,
because you guys are owned by yourself, Jeff.
And then we have outside investors who own less than 30% of the company, and then we've got some key employees with equity. So, we've got a pretty we like where everything is. We like that there aren't any like outside, quote, smart money investors that are going to sit around and try to, smart money asking stupid questions about how we run our business.
Has anybody ever approached you saying like, hey, I can add some gas to this fire, I'll give you 50 million and, we can.
We've recently started to have some more companies start sniffing around about either acquiring or leveraging our engineering capabilities into their own manufacturing. But my belief is that to a certain degree they know what their gap is in capabilities, and they don't know where to start in addressing it, so they'd rather see what we do.
And the gap in capabilities essentially is like the core competency that we were talking before about, like your engineering, which is kind of what it sounds like the only real way to differentiate yourself in a pretty crowded marketplace.
Yeah, it's I'd say that our engineering is best in class, and I've got some really we've done some really cool things in a variety of materials and a variety of manufacturing processes over the last few years, where I can't imagine there are many engineering teams that can play the different notes that we play.
That's so it's not just engineering like the products themselves, but the processes by which they're made.
Correct.
That's those two things are essentially what sounds like your secret sauce.
Yeah,
does that sound about right?
Correct. We do a lot of like some of the stuff we're working on right now. It's the amount of custom equipment that's being built and custom processes. We've figured out how to make like combinations of materials come together in ways that I don't know that anyone's done it before.
Right.
And these are cool things that, there's certainly a cost to it, and the things that we're making are not cheap, but it's also for companies that are looking to innovate and take their products to the next level. We know how to do that.
Take me through a little bit, because it sounds like we've kind of come more or less to like what's happened today with you basically you've gone up, you've built some factories, and things have scaled, things are good. Along the way, I mean, you had to have the fire inside you to learn Mandarin, and then you're doing business in China while living in China for part of that, but then you eventually came back to America. Take me through some of like the tougher parts, because I know this can't all be be smooth sailing, and I know and Sophia, I don't know how thrilled she was to be there, to leave. Take me through a little bit of the personal side of this arc.
Well, yeah. So Sophia actually wanted to stay longer than I did, which was kind of funny, because she was working in an international company doing advertising for Ford Motors for not just China, but for all of like their APAC and Africa and India. Like they were the agency that kind of led all of the regions for Ford. And so she was hanging out in a nice office in Shanghai while I was going out to these like real shithole parts of China to like
that's probably where the factories are.
To go visit these,
not in the Beverly Hills of Shanghai.
No. And so I was also like having to travel from like, I'd take a 5 a.m. flight on Monday morning and get back to Shanghai like Thursday at no flight is ever on time in China, because the military controls the airspace and closes it down at their whim. And so
that's like, good to know. I didn't know that.
So you truly will be like, get to the airport and every flight will be delayed for an indefinite period of time. And you'll just like sit there and be like, great, my 7 p.m. flight's going to leave at 2 a.m.
Oh my God.
And so that would happen like 3 times a month. And so I was just like, this is terrible. And at that point, our business had grown enough where I was actually visiting the States for like a week a month anyway, just to like go see clients and make sure.
So you're doing like an international flight across the Pacific Ocean like twice a month,
essentially. And that's when I was like, it'd be way better just be on the West Coast, and I can deal with these clients. And
it has to have crossed your mind at some point, like this is the juice is great here, but the squeeze is a lot.
That's when I was just like, I need to get out of Asia. Like I'm ready to go back to the US. And so
After it had been how long at this point?
8 years.
8 years. Okay.
And so we also wanted to start a family, and like the pollution of Shanghai is disgusting when you're, a 20 something, but then like terrifying if you want to start a family. Like,
right.
That's a decision that you're making for a small set of lungs that I don't think, is particularly great. So
she wanted to stick around, but one day you say, hey, this is a lot. I'm flying back and forth like crazy. Pretty sure I can do this from the West Coast of America. What do you think?
Yeah.
And she says, cool.
Yeah.
Or
it took a little convincing, but
she's like, I like it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't. But I think, we found Portland to be an interesting place to come to. She's got family history here. Her mom's from Portland, and I liked it because it wasn't like San Francisco or LA or Seattle for that matter.
So there's like some time issues, like, there's sort of like, I guess time zone, some culture, some pollution, there's some things that are kind of driving you here and everything. But business wise, tell me a little bit about, like, we talked a little bit about the gut punches,
Oh man. Yeah. So we've had some real interesting gut punches over the years. And mainly it's just, we will develop a core interesting product. And one of the things that, I guess, to step back and talk about the root cause of most gut punches has been we've always been a very customer service focused. Like, obviously the engineering is really important and everything else, but from like my business partner and I, we're very much like, make sure that our key customers are the happiest they could ever be.
Yeah.
And that works really well, but it also creates concentration issues. And so we've had a few times in our history where we've gotten overly concentrated into one client.
And then that client,
either something happens, they get sold, they have a new management team come in, like whatever was, driving the long-term success that we were having, like, does an abrupt change.
It just like either like evaporates overnight or something about it shifts radically.
And the nature of consumer electronics is that a new device is coming every 12 months or every 18 months.
Sure.
And so the next vendors are not, like, the ability to bring in a new vendor is incredibly close behind your most recent success. And so those were some of those like really unfortunate moments. And then like going into COVID, we had just purchased the factory. We were working on integrating our teams with the factory teams. Everything shuts down, obviously.
Yeah.
And now I'm like remote managing a factory from my attic in Portland. And like the key program that we were like, one of the reasons we purchased this factory was for launching our like one of these key programs that had just come our way.
Yeah.
And the program then kind of got put on an indefinite delay, and we're just like, shoot, and that delay in the beginning of COVID is like, oh, it's going to be like 3 weeks to slow the curve, and then well, we were dealing with China, which was in like full on like, we'll shut it down,
Yeah.
Everyone's stuck in their homes. Like I would say that I was like 2 months ahead of the rest of the world when it came to like what was going on with COVID, because like,
yeah, you're clued in directly.
Yeah, I was in China in January of 2020, and then like left, and then like 2 weeks later, or maybe even less, all the flights were stopped out of China. And then I'm spending like over Chinese New Year trying to figure out where all of my team members were. Like, they'd gone to visit their families. Could they get back to where our factory and office are? Like, are they stuck at their hometowns? Like, are they sick? And doing all of that in early February, and then figuring out like, okay, our key program is now indefinitely delayed, and what fills this factory? And thankfully, we had worked with a Canadian startup that made air filtration masks, and these guys went gangbusters for like the next 7 or 8 months until they completely got over their skis, built way more inventory than they could possibly ever use, and we stayed in business. But they overshot it on that one.
Wow.
And we were like, wow, glad we got paid in advance on some of this stuff. Like,
oh man,
this would have been
I mean,
disaster.
for a while, there was nothing more important for us to have is 1 million masks.
Just
right?
finding masks.
Yeah.
And so that ended up like, being a pretty important inflection point in terms of like, we got through COVID because we were building so many masks. We then had this key program launch, and it was the most, for one of our clients that's a billion-dollar company, it was their most successful launch in this type of product category. And
I'm smelling NDAs around here. That's why we can't get into details.
The product that we made, like the statistics on it were insane of how quickly it all sold out. And then we had to essentially 7x our output in 4 weeks to catch up with demand. And
so these are the late nights. These are the
this is
the
the
grindstone. And your partner is Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Is he East Coast based?
Mm-hmm.
So he's East Coast based. You're West Coast based. You're dealing with people in China. You need to do something really grand within a very short period of time to capitalize on a big opportunity. You're burning the candle.
Oh, yeah, like it's completely insane. Like, just basically, China's 8 a.m. is our 5 p.m. and going from 5 p.m. until they're 4 p.m. Just working. It's
that's
well
getting
into the night, and then waking up in the next morning talking to the customer about what got done. And it's,
dude, I salute you, because that's something I've just been able to tolerate less and less and less as I've gotten older. Like, if you're in residential real estate, you're kind of always on call. So that's why. But then the more you gravitate towards development and commercial, the more you're just at banker's hours. And somebody rings my phone at 7:30, it's probably going into the round file. Like,
yeah.
Whereas in your world,
it's the norm. It's we've had a project that's been going on, and I was talking to some of the engineers on the client side, and I'm like, hats off to you guys. We've been having a standing conference call from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. 5 to 6 nights a week for a full year right now. Like,
but that's just the world that you live in. It's normal. It's normalized.
It's normalized. And I also said this when, I was like 28 years old when I started my business, and I'd be the youngest person in a room of, depending on the company, some pretty heavy hitters.
Sure.
And I'd always be like, I've done X years in Asia, and I promise you I work 2 days for every one that someone in North America works, because I work the full Asia day, and then I'm up at night until God knows what hour, like working with the U.S. team, so they understand what just happened in Asia over the course of the business day.
So
then now I'm in the U.S. and it's flipped. But
so, dude, that's a lot. That takes a lot of desire. That takes a lot of passion. Where do you draw that from? Where does your fire come from inside you? Because at a young age, we talked a little bit about that. But then the years wear on. It seems to me that it could be easy at some point for you to just kind of go on cruise control. But it doesn't seem like that's happened at all. What is driving Eric Skaar at this point?
Yeah, I right now, like, I just came back from the longest like Asia trip, not like in terms of number of days, is about 3 weeks, but like I was putting in easy like 14, 16 hour days. Like, I could see, based on like having my phone in my pocket, that I walked like 8 to 9 miles a day inside of my factory.
But
why? Yeah, I have a unique opportunity right now to like build something really cool, which is like, there aren't that many people who can be like, I own an international business in multiple countries, employ 1,500 people, and work with some of like the biggest, most innovative companies in the world.
So there's an opportunity in front of you.
Oh, there's certainly an opportunity, and it's also just the like, I was explaining this to my oldest son, because I've been away a lot this year. This year's been insane. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get secret status with United on my next trip, which is in like 2 weeks. And it's like, I started out 20 years ago with this idea of like, I want to go see, like, I want to learn about China and decide if I want to go visit there. And if I want to go visit there, it's because I want to like get involved with this growing economy. And like, do something for myself that I can be super proud of. And at this point, like, I'm certainly proud of what I've done to date, but the next step of this thing creates a whole new floor for the business.
That's what you're excited about. So, which brings us to, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I'm excited about, having $100 million business. Like, it's right around the corner if we can stick the landing on all the things we're working on right now.
Dude, that's fucking awesome. I love
it. That's a pretty like crazy thing. And like, for the longest time, my business partner and I have always been like, if we could sell this thing for $100 million, that would be incredible. That would be like, job well done, pat on the back. Like, what hobby do you want to do for the rest of your life? And like, as we're looking at it now, we're just like, God damn, like, we might blow past that valuation before we have time to sell the thing, which is insane. And that's like,
which wouldn't actually surprise me, because if you have the drive behind you that's actually pushing you to like capitalize on these opportunities and to really take advantage of things that are 5 feet in front of your face, then I feel like momentum is a hell of a thing.
It's also like, and the other thing that drives is like, why go and work 16 hours a day walking around the factory? And part of it's just like, I enjoy it. It's like, it's fun. Like, this is like you're in the world of building stuff. Like, building stuff is cool.
It is.
When you like get to see like a immediate change or development to something that you're personally responsible for, it's way different than just being like, I pushed a piece of paper across my desk to somebody else's.
Yeah, no, the building of an empire takes on a ton of different forms.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's real estate development or building factories, building widgets, manufacturing microphones, there's a million different forms it can take on. And there's always a guy behind it who has a passion to actually continue growth, has a growth mindset to these things. And that's the main like theme behind this podcast, is just continuous growth and getting better, getting stronger, just for the sake of it. And the driving forces behind that, and a lot of that really it boils down to like self-actualization. It's why climb the mountain? It's because it's there. Why build this? It's because I can.
Yeah.
And it feels good, like walking around that factory floor. Like it feels great, because it's a small part of a large organism that's growing, and it feels fabulous.
It's to use some great Middleburyan reasoning, it's the Thoreauvian approach versus the Emersonian, which is
you're gonna have to explain that to me.
So process versus product. Like, when I mentioned my partner talking about exit at a certain dollar amount, that's a very product based approach. And it actually, like, I'm like always like, okay, sure, whatever, but like, how do we actually do that? Like, what's the process to get there? And in Walden, Thoreau talks about, what can I learn from growing broad beans? Like, from the act of farming, it's not like, how do I get, a bushel of beans? It's, what do I learn doing it?
Right.
And for me, that's always been like, what's the process that, if you feel like you've got your process dialed in and you're doing things the right way every single day, and your attention to detail is there, and like, you're waking up knowing like what you need to do and how you need to do it, the result, like, that product will get there. It'll probably overshoot what you could have thought the product was if you just focused on like, how do I get to this like tangible result? But instead it's like, no, I'm gonna like, it's also the Jacob Riis quote, like the stone breaker. Like, it's not the stone breaker breaks a stone on the 100th hit, but it doesn't discount the value of hits 99, 98, 97.
The man who enjoys walking will tread the longest distance in comparison to the man who just needs to finish from one point to the other.
Totally. And so I messed up that quote, but that's the gist of it. But so like, when I was over in China, and it was like, it was a tough visit. We had stuff that was like, we're trying to level up a whole lot of stuff at once, and certain things weren't leveling up fast enough. So I got to like roll up my sleeves and be like, no, truly, like, you follow me around the factory floor with a roll of tape, because we're going to be like taping off like how,
like, blue taping.
Like, we're going to put different areas
blue
of
tape walkthrough. Shout out to the developers out there that do the blue tape walkthrough.
But like, we like went through and like did that, and like lining up like where certain material staging areas should be, or where's like the right place for inspection area, and like getting everything set up. And then like,
you ever read The Goal?
Yeah, yeah. The story of Jonas and fixing the next thing that's broken.
Yeah. No, that process you're describing kind of reminds me of the goal. It's like, all right, where are the bottlenecks?
Yeah, and no, that's exactly what we were doing. And what's been fun is like ever since working with like BlackBerry as a 22, 23-year-old and like seeing how their manufacturing people approached it. And at the time, they were best in class. Like, they were the world leader in mobile devices. Like, I learned a lot from that. And the funny thing has been that there's a cost in doing things like perfect. And there are only so many companies that are willing to like pay that cost to get to perfect.
Right.
And there's always a feeling out process of like, okay, so we're going to develop a product for you. Like, let's talk about like what you want and how quickly I can like discern, like, are they really after perfect? Are they just saying they want great product, but they're not like engaged on the process to get
but this is the process that gets your motor running, essentially.
Totally.
From the jump all the way through the end of it, through product landing, somebody enjoying it. That whole process that keeps you going.
Totally. And like, so now I've got clients that want perfect, and I'm like, yes, I can unlock that side of like my brain. Like I can show you, like, because we get it.
That's
like,
harnessing like the full range of your capabilities.
Totally.
Because not everybody can do that. And
correct.
That feels amazing, I'm guessing.
Oh, totally. Like walking through and just being like, now we're setting up this.
See, that's why I had you on the podcast. It's because you get that actually. And so that sort of mindset is really kind of what I'm trying to foster with these conversations.
Yeah.
And so, no, I love it, man. So sounds like what you're excited for in the future is just continued growth and prosperity, and working maybe more with those people that really want, you know, the engineering and the design and the process to be perfect, so you can really harness just the full range of your capabilities and the company's capabilities.
Right.
So that you can eventually eclipse that $100 million mark that you're shooting for, but you know, you might have so much momentum and blinders on, you might not even notice it in the first place.
Correct.
That is the best fucking mindset that, you know, I've heard today, and I love it, man.
That's it. Like, I just enjoyed the building process, and especially, as you said, like finding, you know, the right client base where it's like, oh no, we want perfect. We see that you can deliver on like perfect,
and that's why we called you.
Yeah, let's do this.
Perfect. Yeah. No.
Like, let's make it happen.
Dude, I love it, man. Well, dude, this has been a great conversation. Yeah. I love it, man.
Thank you for having me in for the plunge. This is the best antidote to jet lag that I've found so far. I gotta get one of these set up.
No, it wakes you up. It's peak awakeness.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, no. Then plus like the leg soreness, the jet lag.
It hit a lot of play the right notes, so.
And also just getting in touch with deep down what's, you know, whether you need it or not, what's your driving force behind your business, why we get up early, why we stay late, and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
So, man, dude, how do people find you?
Yeah, so you can check out our website, www.sigmaworldwide.com, and give us a look and see what we do.
Awesome, man. All right, we've got international. What are we calling you? International business manufacturer.
International manufacturing and engineering. There we
go. All right, Eric Skaar, everybody. Thanks so much for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Cool.
So that's the story of Eric Skaar and his company Sigma Worldwide. And dang, what a cool thing the guy has built, and doing it across the globe is really something. I complain when I have to deal with properties that I own that are out of state. So when your business is on the other side of the globe and they speak another language, it makes my problems seem much less significant. Another thing I wanted to emphasize is the concept of becoming one with your business. I've known Eric for a few years now, and I just learned today that he speaks Mandarin. I know guys who have moved to Mexico permanently and still haven't bothered to learn Spanish. Eric took it upon himself to learn the language so he could stand shoulder to shoulder with the laborers, engineers, supervisors at his facilities, and really just immerse himself in his business model. That's going all in, and I just respect the heck out of that. And I really think there's no way to do that unless you're able to summon passion for something, the passion for business, passion for your craft. I talk about that a little bit in the first solo episode of this podcast, and that's a hallmark of every great business owner. They don't just enjoy the end product, like the making a lot of money part. They enjoy the walk, the process, the skills you learn along the way. The man who loves walking will walk farther than the man who loves the destination. And it's clear that Eric loves the walk, and because of this, he's found success. And that's why he's got his sights set on a company that's going to be worth $100 million someday. And that's pretty freaking rad. I'm George McCleary, and I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone out there in listener land, because this podcast is a new thing for me, but I've gotten a ton of supportive messages and comments ever since we launched. So I just wanted to take a moment and express my gratitude to you all. These conversations are only going to get better, so please follow the podcast on Spotify and iTunes, and hopefully these conversations will continue to inspire you like they do for me. I'll see you next time on Frozen Millionaires, and until then, be sure to embrace the cold to ignite the dream.